Good evening, everybody. Hello and welcome to Raise Resilience. I'm seeing lots of you still logging in. Just to do some hello, welcome. Just to do some housekeeping. We can communicate through the chat function, and I invite you to participate, ask questions, and really get involved in these sessions as much as you possibly can to get the most out of them. So just if you could, somebody could just let me know in the chat that you've seen my messages, that you can hear me, just so I know that I'm not talking to myself right now. And maybe just introduce yourself and maybe the ages of your children. Hello, I can see a wave. Hello. Hi, Louise. So these courses, this particular course is designed for parents in general. And so you'll see that there'll be a variety of different ages of children in these sessions, and it is applicable for everyone. And we invite all different good to know. Is that for everybody? If you can see in the chat, Teresa is saying it's cutting out a little bit. Is it just Teresa or is it everybody? Okay, good. Okay. Sometimes just logging in and out can help. Okay, so the sessions are recorded. We will send you resources for your children to, materials for your children to have a go at afterwards, but these sessions are really intended for you as the adult, because we're looking at this at the adult level in these sessions. And today's session is really an introduction, right, to what is basically the research and the science behind all of this. Excuse me. So, resilience is something really personal. So how you feel, please engage with as much or as little as you really want to here. You're totally in charge of how much and how little you share. But you can communicate here through chat, or you can also ask a question, but it's just easier if we all use the chat feature, so it's just in one section on my screen. We'll invite you to join our Facebook page so that we will be continuing the conversation. We are now on Instagram, and we just really invite you to just be continuing these conversations after the 6 weeks. So we'll be here for 6 weeks, talking about resilience, talking about what it means to be a resilient parent and bring up resilient children. But anything that comes up midweek and you have a question or something like that, please just email info@bounceforward.com, and somebody will pop that question over to me and I can answer it in the sessions. But just so you know, we don't answer personal questions, but more like the generic on the generic materials. Like, you didn't understand something, you want me to go over something, things like that. I can really support you with. So my name is Chanel, and I am an ex-teacher, so taught for 15 years in schools, and now do training in and out of schools for myself and with Bounce Forward. particularly in areas of well-being. And this is my baby stuff, and my background is in psychology. So I'm really, really excited to be here. I think this is an incredible course. And obviously, if you've got any, as I said, any questions, please feel free to just jump in and ask. So thanks for some of you just introducing, age range of where we're at. So far, we're all looking at secondary school children. And we have lots of people here, some of them are, with just pregnant and just interested just to know the story and hear the research and figure out what it might be like before they even have a child. So, the variety of different age groups there. So, awesome. Okay. Let's begin. This so reminds me of my own daughter. I have two daughters, and currently their ages, they're 5. She's 5, my eldest is 5, and my youngest is 2. And my teaching career was in secondary school, so I've got the whole span going on in terms of all of these different areas of knowledge and pickets of information. So this reminds me of my daughter, and is the message that, family life isn't always pretty, right? And we are not here to say there is a way of parenting. There isn't a right way to parent, right? And we're not sort of like pushing a particular method, certain sort of style, but all we're doing is giving you the research and the evidence and the neuroscience behind what we know about resilience to inform you. And what we know, what is so clear from the research is that we all, getting it wrong all the time, which we all do, is normal and okay. And that is so important in the process of being a parent, of knowing that there isn't a perfect parent, right? And that to hold that in your forefront of your mind, that perfect parenting doesn't exist. Making mistakes is part of the process, but it's just being aware and acknowledging and repairing in the process. I'm definitely no perfect parent, but what all of this knowledge and all of this research does for me, what it does for me is it gives me ability to reflect on my behavior and the way that I respond and how important I am in the resilience of my children, and gives me clues and information and pockets of information of how I can mold and develop my children in ways that will become really emotionally and socially healthy and strong, because that's what we want for our kids, right? And I think, at this forefront, looking at that image on the screen, particularly with young kids, I know even with, and particularly that shift into teenagers, that negative behavior or the negative things that come out, their behaviors that come out, come from from emotions, right? We're going to talk a lot about emotions. And to start with, to just note that what we know is that it's really, really okay for children to experience negative emotion. It's really, really okay and important. But what we often do as parents is we try and stop that. Right? It feels painful to see our children experience negative emotions of sadness, and we try and stop them feeling it. But what we know from the research is that we need to encourage and allow that expression of that emotion and support them to express that emotion. We can say no to the behavior, but we need to accept that emotion is still there, because emotions are giving us signals, bodily signals about what's coming up for us, and they are really important. So, for example, it would be dangerous if we didn't feel scared, right? Because we wouldn't be able to rush out of a fire or a difficult situation. It'd be really important. It's really important that we feel really, really sad and we can grieve when we experience loss, right? It's important to feel angry and have that feeling of angry. Otherwise, you never know the sense of being wronged. Okay, so we start with this premise that all emotions are normal and negative emotions will happen, and we can't protect our children from them, but we can support them through them and help them deal with those emotions. I hope that's a really big thing, right? To sort of sit with. All emotions are okay. What do we do as a society? I mean, just in the sort of education system, we often try and stop negative, we try and stop anger, don't we? No, you're not allowed to feel angry. But we need to shift that language to you're not allowed to hit, you're not allowed to, all the behaviors, but it's okay to feel angry and give like appropriate ways of dealing with that. Rather than saying no to the anger. So what we also know is that looking after you as the parent really, really matters. I mean, really, really matters. This, when I, think of when there are a lot, when it's a bit chaotic, when it's massively chaotic at home, what's happening for you, or what's going on for you, and think like, which way round is it? Often the way round it is then when we are not okay, when we are not coping, when we are not thriving, when we are not feeling resilient, we then respond in ways that are very triggering, right? We get triggered quicker, we'll shout more, we'll erupt more, we'll punish more, we'll do all these things more when we're not okay. But when we're in control and we're on top of everything and we're feeling really good about ourselves, we manage the family life better. What do you think about that statement? Agree? Can you resonate with that statement? And I think it's so interesting. I don't know if it's, I think it's a female thing, particularly for of this like feeling that a lot of the time, mostly agree. Okay, yeah. I'd love to hear why. And this thing of like giving yourself the opportunity to like recharge your own energy to help the family. That feeling of like, what I need to look after me, to look after my children. And that is a really important tool, or something to like be compassionate about and remember how important you are to support your family. Okay. If anyone wants to share anything or like disagree or comment, please feel free to do that. So I just wanted to draw you in here and start with this question then. So if resilience were an object, what would it be and why? Yeah, I like this. There's lots of things coming up on the constant negativity makes you feel tired and down. Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? And which way round is it? Is it that the negativity you fed into from your children and that's created your vicious cycle, or which way around is it? And often we feed off each other's energy. We know from neuroscience there's this thing called co-regulation, and we feed off each other's emotions. So when somebody is calm, we can feel their calm, and when somebody is stressed or anxious, we can feel that, and it literally like spirals. and as Terry is saying, yeah, and sometimes it's really hard to find that time, and like to give yourself that time, the opportunity to give yourself that time. Yeah, the good times is what happens after resilient times. Beautiful. Yeah. It's interesting when you say after. And, you know, having an aura, you call it a force field, Emily, I call it this aura of knowing, like, you know, that having your, it's like having barriers, right? And knowing your boundaries of what you will allow in and what you're going to reflect off and not allow to, like, you know, really affect you. Yeah, really interesting. Okay, so if it were an object, what would it be? Maybe that's Emily's answer, a force field. Because we're going into like what the research says about. Who is it? Oh yeah, interesting. A magic wand. Can you say why? Umbrella. Nice. So resilience is like having the magic wand to deal with the other jobs and pressures so that you can then focus on what you need to focus on. Really interesting. I love the safe space and umbrella. Wow. Some brilliant ones here. Ones I've never seen. I've been doing this for 2 years now and done it. I've done this course so many times and I've never heard of these ones before. So it's really interesting what different people come up with. And hold on to that, right? Hold on to that image and let's see how it changes or doesn't change, you know, based on this program and what you learn about resilience. Because that's really important, right? So you've got this visual image at the moment of what you feel resilience is for you. Okay, so what does the research suggest about resilience then? Please keep coming in with your ideas while I go through what the resilience says, what the research says. So we know that resilience is about being good enough but not perfect. And so this is this idea of like examining what we know as, what I was starting to talk about at the very beginning, this idea of like what it means to be perfect. Well, there isn't one, right? And we know that the last 20 years, there's been a really good, loads of focus on the everyday magic of resilience, about like muddling through and just getting by and not seeing it as this sort of like superhero thing. Because actually we all have resilience. We just need to tap into it and just knowing what, you know, that actually there isn't this like pedestal and there is no perfect because perfect doesn't exist, right? And that's a lot to do with self-compassion, okay? Because often we beat ourselves up for not doing it perfectly. And that's part of being resilient, right? Is knowing that it's okay and that there are times that and you know, particularly in this next one, there are times when, you know, having a go and keeping going until, you know, till we get this perfect thing. But actually resilience is also about having a go but changing direction when helpful. So it's about persevering and having and doing your best, but also knowing when you're pushing yourself way to, you know, you've actually just you're hitting a brick wall, and there is now a time to, you know, change that strategy. Okay, because we go on a lot about perseverance and we often like overthink effort quite a lot. Like, come on, you need to put more effort and more effort. And actually, a lot of the time, it's that we just need to think about the strategy and tweak the strategy and change the direction. And that's all about this idea of like going, of knowing what is being resilient or not. We also know resilience is about learning from mistakes and failing well. So that's a lot of work on Carol Dweck and this understanding of growth mindset. We're going to go through this like that, but all of these in a lot more detail in different sections of this course. Particularly in week 5, we're going to be looking at learning from mistakes and what that means, and developing something called a growth mindset. But we know that learning from mistakes and feeling that your failure is a learning opportunity rather than like an inward part of your character that's like failed and therefore you just retreat and can't do anything about it. But when you make a mistake, you want to learn about how to do it better. And that's a really interesting one. So I'm just reading the chat. It's hard to think that good enough is good enough when it comes to your children, and because you want the absolute best for them. Yeah. And it's sort of like, how much is wanting the absolute best good, or allowing them to achieve what they think is their absolute best? You know, how much pressure is good, and how much is it that we actually need to step back and allow them to experience life and make those mistakes and fail, and be there for them? Because, you know, pushing them, what is it? Is this actually you know, something that helps or hinders? And it's really just an interesting one to contemplate and think about. We know that reaching out is a really, really interesting one in terms of resilience, because we know that societal pressures have have increased. We've got so many societal pressures that, you know, particularly our children are dealing with, that there have never been before, like social media, you know, the whole pandemic, and just so many things that we didn't experience as children that they're really, really like experiencing now. And we know that being resilient is actually being aware of like your social network and who you can tap into, and using it effectively, right? And being able to tap in and know who to use when you need to, so on and so forth. That's a really interesting one, and a really important one for today's society. We know that impulse control has a lot to do with resilience, and that's like that ability to delay gratification, delay rewards. And we know that that's something that is mapped in a Harvard study, for example, from the age of like 3 or 4, to demonstrate and override academic success. So the ability to control your impulses and delay gratification, meaning that you can wait for a reward from the ages of around 3 or 4, predicts, or is a better predictor of success in your adult life than your academic results. Okay, so we know that this stuff about, you know, reaching out, learning from your mistakes, impulse control, perfectionism, perseverance, all these things are now being you know, held on a like much more sort of research is being done, and the research into the neuroscience to demonstrate what changes happens in our brain, and how important all these things are for our future is just incredible to see how much we have, you know, where we've come in the last 20 years in terms of what we know about being able to build all these skills. And I just want to say on that point that all of these skills, I've got 2 more, but all of these skills here are skills that can be learnt at any age. Okay, these are all skills that can be learnt and taught and nurtured. Okay, these are not something that we're born with and we've either got resilience or we haven't. We can build these skills. Okay, and obviously the younger, the better. And that's really, so what the graph says about the brain is that the younger we are when we're learning these skills, the less effort we have to put in to build that sort of muscle in the brain. Think of it as like a muscle, so that we make it a habit. But if we are, so the older we get, the more effort that requires of us to be able to change that neural pathway and rewire and reshape the brain to build that successful neural pathway. So for example, if I want to practice my impulse control at the age of 38, I'm going to have to put in, you know, I don't know numbers here, but let's say 100 times more effort than my 3-year-old daughter, who because she's so young and her brain is so malleable, she's learning these skills much, much quicker and faster. Okay. And the last two is compassion for self and others. So we know this, you know, it's going back to that perfectionism thing and knowing, you know, how much like the love for ourselves and the self-acceptance is an extremely powerful tool, because we do a lot of like beating ourselves up in our talk. Yeah, we are our worst critic. We are our worst critic. Yeah. And Nelson Mandela said, no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate. And if they learn to hate, they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. And finally, self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is our motivation to carry out a behavior and our belief in like how effective we'll be at it. So if, for example, I really want to be a pilot, and I'm really like, my motivation to be a pilot isn't going to be very high if I'm colorblind, right? Because I don't have the skills to be able to pass that exam to be able to be a pilot. So it's my motivation to carry out a thing that I want to do based on what I believe my skill set is. Right. And a lot of that is about grounding to reality and realizing what our strengths and weaknesses are. Are there any questions? Loads and loads of research there that we're going to break down and make it much more manageable in the next couple of sessions. Please feel free, like I know I'm moving on, but please feel free to just write them down and I will answer them at another point if I've already moved on. So I'm just going to introduce you to these two concepts. Oh, I would if I had left them on the screen. There we go. And I know that these images can seem really like, yeah, well, I would love to do the second one if I had time type of response, right? But the first one is more like, you know, when you've got to get through tasks and that's survival, you're in survival mode. Obviously, you're going to be in the doing mode in the head, right? So there's this concept of, it comes from mindfulness really, of this idea of like, how much are we always in a doing mode, meaning that we're sort of task orientated. So we're either focused on the past and like going through something, we're focused on a task, focused on like doing the next thing on our list. And how often are we fully present in the moment of what we're actually doing, right? And it could be often we notice that even in the mundane moments of our life, like brushing our teeth, having breakfast, that we're so distracted with like doing, checking messages, checking social media, checking emails, thinking about what my jobs are for today. And we rarely allow the brain to just be present. Okay. And this is an art. This is a skill. This can be trained. This concept of like, how much are we doing versus being in our everyday life? And I know loads of people will argue, well, like it's not possible, but it is about like training the brain through minutes a day of refocusing the attention to being present on brushing your teeth for 1 minute. And when the mind wanders, to bring it back to the present moment. And we're going to practice that in a little exercise at the end of this session today, to just give you an introduction to what it means to think about this idea of like doing versus being. I know for me, I get really like I'm a naturally anxious person, and I go into like task orientation and I get really focused on task. And I have to keep on reminding myself to like be present at breakfast, be present, be there and fully listen. That's just such an interesting and important topic, right? So give yourself a little score, percentage, sorry. How much of your day are you in the doing mode versus being? Yeah, thank you for being really honest, everybody here. Yeah. So just a small little example, there's loads of research to say, okay, so how do we de-escalate misbehavior, right, within our children? And there's loads of research to say that when we can actually dedicate 5 minutes of absolute quality time to each child, one-to-one, where we may name it special time, where you're fully listening and engaged, and like at their level, eye level, reading a story, really engage, not just reading a story, but really like asking the questions and really being with them, that de-escalates misbehavior, because what everybody wants is to be seen and heard, right? So just shifting like ourselves into the being can actually give us more time for the doing when we feel like we're really time struck, right? I'm just throwing little snippets here and there of different pieces of work in this area. So what we know about resilience, like sort of depends on what age, obviously, our children are. And I just want to show you developmentally what we mean by that. So we've got this like newborn age and the baby ages. And we know that the brain is like the most malleable at this point. This is where they're building their habits. And their habits form in this time. And this is where modeling is the most effective way of teaching resilience. Modeling meaning doing it, right? And showing resilience yourself. So the more you model resilient behaviors, the more that they will pick up that method of dealing with stress, right? So for example, like if you get stressed and you start screaming down the phone at a bank manager, that will naturally be passed, like that sort of, that learning happens at that age, right? They're like sponges and they're taking on different ways of learning. And in the same way, the next stage is very much about modeling. Okay, and it's here that we can start to introduce like setting them up to see failure as a positive thing, and modeling resilience, using praise in different ways to support brain development. Again, something we're going to continue the story of and unpick. And using this idea that their brain is so easily being formed and tuned. So the more that they have role models around them that are showing resilient behaviors, the more they're picking up resilient behaviors. And then they get to like teenage years. And what happens is we as parents are not the most important people in their lives anymore. And it shifts around the ages of 12, 13, up, really, when we're talking about developmental, it's a big, it's not as simple as like 12. Let's go from like 10 to 14 because everyone's different. Here's when you can really teach key skills of coping strategies, right? Where we as Bounce Forward really home in on like, right, these skills need to be taught in schools, and this is how we can really support children in thinking about their thinking and thinking about how to be resilient. Because we know that peer groups become so much more important here at this developmental age. And so a parent's role at this age is a lot about being a good listener and continuing that into their older adult years is really about like being there and being able to like hold space and not trying to fix problems for them. I know we always desperately want to fix their problems, but allowing them the space and the ability to come to you and feel that they can come to you, but not so that you would take over and tell them how to solve the problem, but giving them the air and the space to like reflect and think about it, and just being that support. Much simpler when you say it than it actually is. Because when you're emotionally involved in it, it becomes a lot more difficult. But that is actually what we would want to strive for, right? Being a really good listener at this stage, and being able to be like there for them when they need us, and them knowing that they can come to us when they need us. So how do we do that, right? So we know that resilience is really, really about basing everything that we know on reality, okay? And it can only begin when you have a realistic view of the situation, okay? So it is really, really about like not just putting on like rose-tinted glasses, and we're not suggesting here at all that it's about like just being happy and positive and thinking positive thoughts. It's really about making sure that we are basing everything that we know on what is actually going on around us and being realistic about the situation. And life isn't about how to survive the storm, but learning to dance in the rain. Like that one. And so one of the resources you'll be sent is some work on emotions, like a little video. You'll get a video on emotions, but it's just really important for us to remember when we think about it, like learning about our emotions and learning about vocabulary for our emotions is a really, really important tool to help with emotion regulation and self-development. And this ability to regulate and control our impulses, right? Because we want to like get, if we want to feel really frustrated and we want to shout, we need to be able to control that, right? And that is about learning about what that means to feel frustrated, that feeling of frustration, what happens in our body, so on and so forth. So thinking about and remembering that we have a variety of emotions, and that we have helpful and unhelpful strengths of emotions, okay? But they're all useful and they all are okay. And I know that's actually not something we as a society actually naturally teach. So that's a hard one to like rethink about, because we don't naturally teach it. We do the whole thing of like, don't be angry, right? Or if you're gonna act like that, go away and come back when you're calm. But actually, we need to reverse that thinking, or reverse the language around that, and think about it as like, it's really okay to feel really, really sad about that, or really upset about that, even if you don't agree. And that's like taking the judgment away. So even if you don't agree that it's okay to feel angry or sad about that, to accept that they may feel sad or angry about that is a really important part. You may say, I don't accept your behavior, the way you've acted, but it was really okay to feel those feelings. Is such a different way of reshaping and rethinking about our emotions, and something to just have in the back of our mind about, how do we act when we see negative emotion in our children? And remembering that we need to build empathy and compassion to improve this, like this story of thinking about our emotions. So that's just the little video. I don't have the video here to show you, but just so you know, there's a little video that demonstrates what happens in the brain, that we have like let's say, a limbic system. So this is our limbic system. This is our core part of our brain. And we have a cortex that goes over the top. And basically what happens in our brain is when we become emotional, this lid flips. Okay. And the lid flips. And the cortex's job, the top bit, is decision-making, planning, consequences, learning. All the really sort of like cognitive skills come from here, this cortex. And when we become emotional about something, it like hijacks it, disengages this part of the brain. So that's why learning about our emotions and saying, that, you know, that's a powerful emotion, that's telling me something, I'm learning about this emotion, I'm naming the emotion, helps us to close the lid and thinking about how we might harness our emotions, bringing them in and reining them in and calming ourselves down, is a really, really important part to thinking about resilience. So our emotions help us deal with difficulty because they give us messages, right? They give us messages. And they help us thrive because we've got loads of different signals that are giving us signs to act upon something. Right? So if we're feeling angry, we may feel there's an injustice that we need to attend to, rather than, you know, lashing out or punching, so on and so forth. So how do our emotions help us? Sorry, how do our emotions hinder us from dealing with difficulty? What do you think? Yeah, can't think logically because the brain, because basically they become so overpowered that it flips the lid and they can't think logically anymore because we haven't been able to, we're not listening to them and we're not tuning into them. Yeah, I like that, brain fog. Like neuroscientists literally say, like, call it like the flipping of the lid. So, and when do they limit our ability to thrive? The same way. Yeah. Okay. So we've talked a lot about like accepting negative emotion. So what about positive emotion? Okay. And what's its role? Well, research tells us so many interesting things about positive emotion. We know that positive emotion is when we're experiencing positive emotion, it's when our brain is working at its best. So positive emotion shuts the lid of our when it gets hijacked, and therefore the cortex is engaged and we can then learn. So the more we can engage ourselves in positive emotions, and that isn't just high energy, excited, lots of energy, that's also low energy emotions of calm, serene, peace. All of those emotions are really important to try and encourage, right? Because not only do they have beneficial properties for the actual moment, like, okay, so if I do some, I don't know, knitting and it calms my body, it not only calms my body in that moment, but brain research has been able to show that it actually has these long-term benefits on the screen. So long-term, the more positive emotion I engage in, the more it's developing my intellectual resources, developing my physical resources, developing my social resources, and developing my psychological resources, right? And so my message here is that positive emotions really, really make a difference. And it's about intentional activity, right, as a coping strategy. So going back to this idea of lids being flipped, what can we do to close that lid, to engage in a positive emotion, to help our brain flip back again? yeah, and close its lid, because we know that feeling good is not just a nice to have, it's a need to have to develop all these skills long term. So what can we do? And what toolkit do you have? Okay, what are your go-to strategies to calm your body when you feel frustrated, angry, nervous, agitated, irritated, jealous? All these things, all these emotions that we experience, what do you do? Okay, what's your go-to strategy? I always say, you know, have 3 in your back pocket, right? This is what I would recommend all kids to have 3 toolkits, 3 strategies to use. And these strategies can't just be used like, oh, right, you're feeling really stressed, let's try one. It doesn't work like that. There's something that has to be practiced when you are already in a calm state, so that the brain knows how to then use them when it's like the lid's been flipped. Okay, so it's not something that you can just test out when you're really stressed, right? That's why it's so important that this is something that is developed, right? So you've got kids at home, and obviously every day you have up and downs of emotion. And so the idea is that you're thinking about, together with your children, maybe learning some or doing some of these activities together to develop your toolkit, to improve your abilities to manage those emotions when they get really out, big. So we've put them in different categories here. We know that breathing has incredible benefits to the body, and we know that increasing the exhale slows down the nervous system, right? So when we're in overdrive, we want to engage the vagal nerve, and we want to lower the nervous system that's going, adrenaline's pumping, and so increasing the exhale really changes like physical factors in the body, physical symptoms in the body of like heart rate and so on. Mindfulness, muscle relaxation, distraction. Yeah, and as someone's saying in the Shez is saying in the chat, exercise is not there, and yeah, sleep, diet, right? There's other ones, and there's maybe other ones that are not here that you use, but you'll be sent a pack excuse me, to have a look through with your children, to start to like have a go at them. I often do this at bedtime with my children, and go through different I call them calming activities, and we do different activities to focus and practice, so that I know that at one point when they really need them, they'll be able to tap into them. Okay. Questions, thoughts, comments? So my key messages, if you're still typing, please do continue. My key messages, I'm going to have a go at a mindfulness activity now, but my key messages are: emotions are so important. Learning about naming our emotions helps regulate the brain, helps regulate the body. And having a toolkit to harness and manage those emotions is a really important part of resilience. And so let's take a breath together, a 3-minute breathing space. Yeah, just taking time out and stopping, right? And that's this, going back to that concept of just being. And this is the practice of being mindful. Some of your kids might have had a go at it in schools, and some of it didn't, some of them might have had a bad experience with it. However, if you move away from this like meditation idea, mindfulness is literally paying attention to the present moment on purpose. That is what it means, right? So tuning in to what is going on right in front of us. Distraction is a technique. They do need to face it eventually. Oh, I see. Yeah. But when all we want to do, right, is we want to calm the body. So what we're doing is distracting with something calming, like maybe it might be a little drawing or a game or something. Why? What we're doing is we're closing the lid of the brain so that we can then problem solve, because we can only problem solve and like think through and deal with the difficulty when we are calm. Because when we're already stressed, lids flipped, and here is all our skills of problem solving, thinking, learning, thinking through consequences, dealing with difficulty. All of that happens in this part of the brain. How do I make my kids interested in practicing when they're not stressed? Make it fun, right? Do it with them, like learn something together, right? So I'm interested, you might say something like, let's try some of these. I find some really interesting breathing exercises. Should we give them a go together? Would you like to just have a go? Because I know, well, here's the science behind it. Apparently, it really changes the way your body feels. Why don't we give it a go for 10 breaths and see if we notice anything? Because we also know that unless we practice it when we're calm, we won't be able to use it when we're stressed later. So it's worth having a go. What do you think? Sorry. A safe space is a beautiful one, which is about visualizing and writing down and journaling, or drawing, depending on you and your children, where you feel most safe. Yeah, it's a really, really beautiful exercise to do, and then you bring it to mind when you need to. And it's such a lovely one. Okay, so let's take a breath.
Meditation 8, the 3-minute breathing space. Taking a breathing space, making a definite change in your posture so it embodies a sense of being awake. Perhaps closing the eyes if that's possible. And beginning step 1 by seeing what's going on in your mind and body right now. What's the weather pattern like inside? What thoughts are around? What feelings are here? Any sensations in the body? Not trying to change anything, but opening to what's already here. Then moving to step 2, bringing the attention to the breath, narrowing the spotlight of attention on sensations of the breath in the abdomen, tuning into the changing physical sensations of the in-breath for its full duration and the out-breath for its full duration. And if the mind wanders, simply acknowledging where it went and gently escorting it back to the breath. And now step 3, expanding the focus of your awareness around the breath to take in the whole body, as if the whole body were breathing now. Aware of your posture, your facial expression, sensations on the surface of the skin and from right inside the body. Holding in awareness all the sensations in your body right now, just as they are. Coming home to the body. Coming home to this moment. Meditation 8.
Any thoughts, comments, anything at all came up for you? Hearing that. Ruth, I've seen your comment. I will come to that in a second. Any other tool that came up for you with the meditating? It's a 3-minute breathing space. Comes from that book. There are brilliant apps that you can use for sleep and meditation and stories. My favorite one is the Insight Timer. Really, it's a free resource. Use it all the time with my children and myself to like play nice relaxing music to help myself sleep, with nice meditations. So Justine is saying she felt like it was calming. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to show you the end of this session, the end of today, and I'll come back to Ruth's point. So in an email with the recording, you'll be sent a link to a quiz. It's a questionnaire, and the point is that we're asking you to have a go at taking to have a go at a strengths questionnaire, so that the reason is that you'll come up with the results straight away. It takes 15 minutes to do. So you complete the Institute of it's just disappeared from my the VIA Character Strengths. There we go. The VIA Character Strengths survey takes 15 minutes. And the idea is that we ask you to do it now because we'll use it in 6 weeks' time. So the reason we ask you to do it now is I want you to start to be aware, okay, what are my strengths? When are they helpful? When do they get in the way for me? And just being more aware of them over this time before we sort of get into using them and playing to our strengths for session 6. Terry, thanks for that. A rare moment to recognize my own emotions. Yeah. To tune into me. 3 minutes it was. And, you know, the results are that you're, you know, like the neuroscience of mindfulness is that you're rewiring, reshaping the brain to attend to something when you like to basically focus. So it's a really, really effective, brilliant. I mean, I've done the training. It's quite. I think it's amazing. I know lots of people don't, but I'm a big fan. And you'll also be sent some resources, a quiz to get them engaged in this idea of like, what is resilience? You may decide to do the whole 6-week course, look at all the resources and then distribute it and go through it, you know, how you want at the end. Or you may decide to go, okay, here's some stuff this week. Let's just have a go. Let's have a look at these common focus ideas and just jump in here and there with different things that you feel comfortable having a go at. It's really up to you how you go about this. The famous failures quiz is a great one for teenagers. It really gets them involved in thinking about what is resilience, because it's about this idea of like all these famous people out there and what happened to them and how they, you know, what is resilience. They basically failed so many times to get to where they are, right? And thinking about what that means to fail well, which comes up more in session 4. And just lovely different areas that you can have a go at. Our disclaimer is you know your children best and choose appropriate tasks for them. And we do have 3 different levels. You'll see that each resource comes with 3: basic, intermediate, advanced, based on the age of your child and where you think that they're at. So we're at the end of the session. I noticed Ruth made a comment, and I think my response to that is, yeah, I totally hear you. It's when you're under time pressure, you really want to like engage with them and think about how you can help, you know, support them in the moment of that emotion. But the best thing you can do in time pressure is validate the emotion. Okay, validate the feeling that they are having, because all we want as humans is to be seen and heard. We want to feel seen. We want to feel heard. And when somebody says, I know it's really tough, I know that you're really struggling right now, but we need to get in the car, right? But the fact that you've just like validated that feeling that they're having is really, really, really like important in this journey. And instead of saying, oh, we'll talk about it later, let's get in the car, what you're doing there is dismissing that feeling by saying, I hear you, I see you, you know, I see the suffering, and we'll come back to it. But we need to go now, right? Is my best thoughts for you in those time pressured moments. You are in for a treat, as next week you have the CEO taking session 2. Lucy Bailey will be taking you through optimism during uncertainty. And I will be with you for session 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. So Lucy will be here next week, taking you through optimism during uncertainty. And in the meantime, as we said, any questions? Yes, it's the same link next week. The same Zoom link next week. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. Enjoy next week's session. Thanks, guys. Thank you, everybody. That's really sweet. Thanks for the comments. Thanks all. I'm ending the meeting now.